You know, I'll tell you something. This is a great education on legal insanity. I mean, it's really going in depth to learn. I'm learning. I hope you're learning. But we've got to see if it's really in this case or not. Let's talk about it with In Session legal analyst and contributor Sunny Hostin joining us out of New York, and forensic and clinical psychologist Dr. Daniela Schreier joining us from Chicago this afternoon. Dr. Schreier, you know, they're talking about the delusions, that he had so many delusions. And the delusions are really centered on protecting the children. He got his marching orders that he had to protect and save these children. So it makes no logical sense to a lot of people that you then go out and buy a gun and kill Rusty Snyderman. I mean, if you have delusions, you go and you get the children out of school, or you somehow get the children and put them in your rented car and you drive away. The jury's going to look at this and say, this just doesn't make sense.
And I agree. First of all, I never assessed Schneiderman or Neumann. We have to see that. But it doesn't make much sense. I'm much more with the prosecution on that, means the people who testified with the prosecution. I do think we have a typical affair here. One person wanted to go to Paris. That was him. That means it's love. It's everlasting. We are leaving our partners. We will be together forever. While she probably stopped in London. I had a good time. You might be useful to me, but I'm not leaving my husband. And I'm just thinking, because yes, she did yo-yo with him, right? She gave him a little bit and then she went back. And we generally, as people, get more obsessed with another person or with our love or infatuation for them if they're not so easily available. So I think he got drawn in. He never had any signs of delusion before. At least we don't know about a pre-existing mental health history. And then all of a sudden, it seems much more logical. He goes out. He might have been influenced by her because she said, well, I could be with you, but I really can't. I have my husband. He might have thought the husband is not good to the children. But listen, Jean, he met the husband. The husband even wanted to help him to set him up with a new job. So yes, it does not make any sense. It appears that he went out to shoot the husband to take his place, to get what he wanted.
Dr. Schreier, I guess we got your opinion on it. You know, to Sunny Hostin, Sunny, let's have everybody watch this video, because I got a comment on my own Facebook page about Andrea Snyderman saying this woman may be mentally ill here. There's something very wrong. Now, you see, that's Shanna Citron leaving the stand. Okay, she's prosecution witness. And in front of the jury, you see Andrea Snyderman kiss her, hug her, and hold her. And we know what happened after that. She goes out the door and sits her down on a bench. We don't know exactly what she said, but there allegedly were some comments that made Shanna Citron be scared and concerned. Sunny Hostin, now we have criminal charges against Andrea Snyderman. Do you think she's going to say that she was delusional?
I don't think so. I mean, I think certainly Andrea Snyderman may be sort of crazy like a fox, right? I think she may be a pretty manipulative, scheming type of person. And I think we saw evidence of that when she did that in the courtroom, when she approached who used to be her best friend, who gave, quite frankly, damaging testimony against her. And then, in my view, as it was reported, threatened her. Outside of the courtroom, but in the face of the jury, sort of behaved as if she was a loving friend. And so we see a lot of duplicity there. And I suspect that that is the same sort of duplicity that perhaps Hemy Neuman saw. And you know, I think that we're going to hear a lot more and learn a lot more about Andrea Snyderman in her criminal trial.
And this is probably why the defense brought this up, and they wanted the jury to see this interaction and to know the rest of the story and all that. Dr. Schreier, I want your professional opinion on Andrea Snyderman. And she's got supporters out there, because there is a website now devoted to the Friends of Andrea. And R. Stanberry wrote a lengthy bit about Andrea Snyderman. But he says, quote, that Hemy Neuman has begun to draw sympathy from the general public because he was, quote, driven to do it by a manipulative woman. Let me just address that for a second. There is nothing in Andrea Snyderman's history to suggest that she is manipulative in any way, shape, or form. And Dr. Schreier, I found myself sitting here thinking, this poor man in the cashmere sweater in the defendant's seat, this poor man. And then you have to remember, no, wait a minute. He bought a gun and he shot an innocent man, a young father who had just taken his son to school.
Absolutely, I am with you. But you see, I had the same impression. He sits there, he hangs his hat, and we see who is actually the manipulator in the courtroom. Andrea seems to be the manipulator. What I'm always seeing, however, is this. She might not have a criminal record, but I think true behavior actually comes through, when we are in times of distress. And for her, I think her facade was breaking open in the courtroom. She's very dramatic and erratic, and that was why she couldn't attend the court anymore. Right? The judge said she cannot. She came back then for her testimony. She tried to be actually very stone-faced at the beginning, but she charged back at the prosecutor. He was very soft-spoken. But remember, initially then she started to move her head and her neck, and she became very aggressive, very short-tempered, and she showed us not a very lovable individual. Personality traits, we all have them. And for me, there was something a little bit coming out like black and white thinking. She was definitely impulsive. She had a very hard time to contain herself. We cannot say that she drove the man to kill somebody, but definitely she has.
Is that mental illness? Because that's not normal. You're under oath in the sanctity of a courtroom and you're pointing your finger at the prosecutor?
But the fact is, it's personality, and we all have personality traits. According to insurances, you're not treated for personality traits. It cannot be reimbursed. But see, we have people out there, they have narcissistic traits or borderline traits, histrionic traits. This is a cluster B of personality, and she certainly displayed some of the traits. She was very charged. She was kind of aggressive. And this is definitely a piece that she might keep under control when you see her every day in the community. But I think even her former mom-in-law said that, well, this is the temper that I saw sometimes. And so maybe in her private life with her husband, and then also in the relationship to Neuman, that came out at times, for sure. That's what we saw.
And it might come back to haunt her in her own criminal trial. All right, thank you to Dr. Daniela Schreier, and Sunny Hostin will be back with you in just a few minutes. But there's been a lot. All right, I want to take that discussion and bring it over to this case. Some real serious issues. Joining me is clinical and forensic psychologist Dr. Daniela Schreier. All right, doctor, let's assume for a minute as true that Hemy Neuman had non-bizarre delusions, meaning you don't see them outwardly. How productive was he? He was a manager. He oversaw thousands of employees, $8 million budget, but yet these delusions are going on inside. It's very scary. What can you look for? How can somebody see what's actually going on inside of him?
Well, that's very difficult, because when we're talking about delusions, right, they can only, for example, be addressing one area of your life. Some person might think he's Elvis, right, and impersonates, does all these things. They might only tangential kind of come over in the other areas. However, you see, it means, again, I told you before, I was more with the people who testified for the prosecution. Other employees had noticed that he had actually expressed interest, right, towards Andrea. They say that, well, I was emailed maybe twice by him, or he called me once on the cell phone, but these two were always traveling together. Everyone knew when they had a meeting, they were always sitting together. They had lunches together. So I do think that
everybody saw this, all right, but do you think the responsibility should be on Andrea? Because Andrea saw some things that were abnormal, because we see that in evidence, and she's the one to stop it and take action. She testified this was a new job, and I want to keep my job.
Well, but as a woman, I sympathize with her, and you will do the same, because it is very difficult to work in an environment where you feel harassed. But her fact was, I had to keep my career. Now, let's check the facts here. She's not coming from a family that was actually not having any other income. Yes, her husband just had a startup going for him, but he was an investor. This family had actually a big budget. They had over 800,000 to 1 million kind of in the bank and in investments, okay? He was very savvy. So she definitely could have gone to HR and reported if she really felt that he harassed her, and she told him to stop, that this is going on, and can I transfer to another unit? I don't mean to blame this man. There might be something going on. Yes, we are responsible for ourselves. Now, see.
You know, Dr. Schreier, we got to take a break. We're going to continue this conversation after the break, but here's the thing. Rusty Schneiderman didn't have to die, and I want to learn from this so it never, ever happens again to anybody else. All right, we're going to come right back. And welcome back. You know what time it is? It's my favorite time, because I get to talk to you, our 13th jurors. Joining us to talk with you is legal analyst and contributor of In Session, Sunny Hostin, and also joining us is clinical and forensic psychologist Dr. Daniela Schreier. All right, let's go to Roger in Arkansas. Hi, Roger.
Hi there.
Thank you for calling.
Well, my opinion is kind of down and simple. I think that Hemy was in heat, and his actions Hemy's a bright guy. And when you look at it and you say, well, he's not stupid, that's crazy what he did. And somebody said, well, if you're crazy, that's insane. And I think he had enough time and enough education and enough help to get the insanity plea where it is. And what I wonder is what would happen had they tried Hemy and Andrea together? Would that stand up, that crazy insanity?
Right. I think you've got a great point right there. Sonny Hostin, you know, many times when you have co-defendants, they are severed because the defenses are different. It can be very unconstitutional to try two people together. If they had charged Andrea Snyderman at the same time Hemy Neuman, would we have a different trial right now?
Well, certainly, but the bottom line is, you know, I don't even think Andrea Snyderman was on the radar of law enforcement. I mean, they just didn't even look to her. I think as a result of Hemy Neuman's trial and watching her on the witness stand and some of the things that she did off the witness stand, I think sort of focused or refocused this investigation on her part in this. But initially, I don't even think they thought to target her.
But the evidence was there. I mean, numerous phone calls right after the shooting occurred. She told people that Rusty had been shot, and she didn't even get to the hospital yet where she was informed that Rusty had been shot, so it was awful strange. Let's go to some Facebook comments, all right? Beverly Coogan writes, Mrs. Snyderman reeled Hemy in until he thought he was Mr. Snyderman. And Ryan Robillard said, I don't think Andrea had anything to do with it. He wore a fake beard, because if Andrea found out it was him, she would be upset. She may be guilty of being a tease, but I don't think that's a crime. All right, let's go to our next caller, Ann in Georgia. Hi, Ann.
Hello.
Thank you for calling.
You're welcome.
So what do you think, Ann, if the two hadn't been so close, would Rusty Snyderman be alive today? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I have a couple of thoughts on that. One is that when I was watching the psychiatrist talk about the 7-hour interview on yesterday, I was thinking as I watched the prosecution, and she was saying that he broke into tears a few times, and it was only related to his past history and the traumas in his life. My first thought was I would have immediately jumped on that and said, oh, then he shows no remorse even up until this day for taking the life of another individual.
You know, Ann, you're exactly right. Let's go to Dr. Daniela Schreier. And, you know, I asked Dr. Adriana Flores when she was sitting here on the set, who was one of the defense experts, did he cry? And she said he did. And she, just as Ann is saying, he cried when he talked about his child. And I said, so he didn't cry about Rusty Snyderman, a young father who lost his life? And she said no. What does that tell you?
Well, I think it's very interesting because if he's really still very much obsessed with Andrea, he still very much might just think about himself and her and the children together. What he might have thought, he just removed a roadblock, right? And he might not have a lot of sentiment about that still. When we saw him in trial, he looked kind of sad. He looked always down. And I think he knows what he did was wrong. He might not have any emotion. It means like many people who have a little narcissism, we all have a trait of that. It's like, it's about me. How is my life going to turn out? I want this woman, and what do I have to do to get it? And that might still be the position.
You know, I'll tell you something, though. When you're in a trial, watching a trial in the courtroom, and you see the defendant crying for the victim, and I have seen that. George Hughley in Virginia with the Yardley Love case, he cried when Yardley Love came up on the screen. That goes a long way. He was convicted, but not the top count.